Something big is brewing, and this time, it's not in Europe, the Middle East, or Africa. It's in America's own backyard. For most of the 2020s, South America looked like one of the only regions spared from major wars. But now, that peace is cracking fast. Think about it. While Ukraine has been burning, Israel has fought multiple wars, Africa has been shaken by coups and insurgencies, and Asia has seen tensions rise between India and Pakistan. South America stayed unusually quiet, almost like a rare island of calm in a stormy world. But that calm is over. Last week, the United States suddenly sent warships toward Venezuela, and within hours, Nicolas Maduro's government was mobilizing its military. What started as talk of drug cartels and sanctions may now be tipping toward something far more dangerous. A direct confrontation that could drag the US into another war. So what exactly pushed Washington and Caracas to the brink? And is South America about to become the world's next battleground? Stay with me because we're going to break it all down step by step, and the story only gets more explosive from here. For years, South America felt like the one place the world could count on to stay out of chaos. But looks can be deceiving. Throughout the 2020s, global conflicts have exploded. Ukraine has been locked in a grinding war with Russia. Israel has fought Hamas, Hezbollah, Iran-backed groups, and even the Houthis in Yemen. Sudan has plunged into a bloody civil war. Coups and insurgencies have ripped through Africa's Sahel region. And Asia has had its own flare-ups, like India and Pakistan's dangerous standoff, and even tensions between Thailand and Cambodia. Against that backdrop, South America almost looked like a safe zone. No major wars, no massive invasions, just political struggles, economic crises, and protests, but nothing close to a battlefield. And because of that, many assumed the continent was untouchable, a place where conflict elsewhere in the world couldn't spill over. But that's exactly why today's crisis is so alarming, because all of that could change fast. Now, the illusion of peace is shattering. For the first time in decades, the threat of a real military confrontation in South America is on the table. And it's not just a regional problem. With US warships moving in, it could quickly become an international flashpoint. So, what set this dangerous chain of events into motion? Let's talk about the trigger that pushed the United States and Venezuela onto a collision course. The calm broke on August 20th. That's when the White House made a stunning announcement. US warships were heading straight for Venezuela. 3 Aegis-class guided missile destroyers, the USS Gravely, the USS Jason Dunham, and the USS Sampson, were ordered into the Caribbean. Alongside them, nearly 4,000 American personnel trained and ready. Officially, the move was part of Donald Trump's new crackdown on Latin American drug cartels. But the story didn't stop there. Just 1 week later, a source confirmed that even more firepower was on the way. The USS Lake Erie, a heavily armed missile cruiser, and the USS Newport News, a nuclear-powered fast-attack submarine, would soon join the fleet. To top it off, the deployment included at least 1 P-8 Poseidon aircraft, a high-tech surveillance plane capable of tracking ships, submarines, and even ground movements for hundreds of miles. This wasn't a symbolic move. This was serious firepower, enough to shake the region and send a very clear message to Venezuela's leader, Nicolas Maduro. Washington is done playing games. And while some analysts tried to downplay it as anti-narcotics operations, the timing and scale suggest something far bigger. For Venezuela, this wasn't just about drugs, this was about survival. So the question is, why is the United States suddenly putting so much pressure on Maduro? The answer goes back years, and it's tied directly to drugs, cartels, and the man at the center of it all. To understand why US warships are parked off Venezuela's coast, you need to understand one thing. Washington doesn't just see Nicolas Maduro as a dictator. It sees him as a narco-terrorist. Back in 2020, the U.S. Department of Justice hit Maduro and 14 of his closest allies with sweeping charges. The accusation? That for more than 20 years, they conspired with Colombia's FARC guerrillas to smuggle tons of cocaine into American cities. At the time, U.S. Attorney General William Barr said those shipments had devastated American communities. To drive the point home, Washington put a price on Maduro's head. The reward for his arrest started at $15 million, then jumped to $25 million, and just this month, it doubled again to a jaw-dropping $50 million. That's cartel kingpin money, and it doesn't stop there. In February, the U.S. officially labeled Tren de Aragua, Venezuela's most notorious gang, a terrorist organization. Alongside them on the list, El Salvador's MS-13 and 6 of Mexico's most violent cartels. The message was clear. Washington now views Maduro's Venezuela not just as corrupt, but as a terror state. Interestingly, the pressure isn't coming only from Washington. Just days after Trump sent the fleet, both Paraguay and Ecuador took the unprecedented step of declaring the Venezuelan-linked Cartel of the Suns an international terrorist organization. That's the cartel Maduro is accused of leading, alongside generals and top officials from his regime. Even the name tells a story. The Suns comes from the golden sun insignia worn by Venezuelan generals. So now the stage is set. The US and its allies say they're targeting cartels. Maduro says it's all a cover for regime change. But either way, the net is tightening around Caracas. And with international pressure closing in, the question becomes, who's lining up with the US? And who's standing behind Maduro? Here's where things get even more interesting. It's not just the US turning up the heat on Maduro. Some of his neighbors are quietly joining in. On August 21st, just one day after Trump ordered US destroyers into Venezuelan waters, both Paraguay and Ecuador officially declared the Cartel of the Suns a terrorist organization. That cartel, remember, is the shadowy network allegedly run by Venezuela's top generals, with Maduro himself accused of being one of its leaders. Now, Paraguay and Ecuador didn't make that move alone. Both countries have deep security ties with Washington. In June 2024, the US and Ecuador signed a major defense cooperation agreement, pumping nearly $100 million in aid into military training, aircraft, vehicles, and counter-narcotics operations. And just this year, the US and Paraguay signed a new security memorandum focused on migration control, countercrime, and intelligence sharing. In other words, these aren't random announcements. They're coordinated, and they show that the US is quietly building a coalition against Maduro, using regional allies to isolate Venezuela diplomatically, economically, and militarily. For Maduro, that's a nightmare scenario. South America was once a region where he could rely on quiet support, or at least neutrality. But now, his circle of friends is shrinking fast, and even his neighbors are painting targets on his back. So how does Maduro respond when the walls start closing in? He does what embattled strongmen always do. Deny everything, deflect blame, and claim it's all a foreign plot. So how does Nicolas Maduro react when the US puts warships at his doorstep and slaps a $50 million bounty on his head? He doubles down. Maduro's government immediately went into damage control mode. Caracas blasted Washington's actions as nothing more than a cover for regime change, calling the US naval deployment an illegal act of aggression. Venezuelan state media painted the entire operation as a distraction, claiming Trump was simply trying to score political points back home. Maduro himself pushed back hard, insisting that Venezuela had nothing to do with cartels, gangs, or so-called narco-terrorism. Instead, he accused the US of fabricating charges to steal Venezuela's resources, especially its vast oil reserves. But it didn't stop at words. Almost immediately, Venezuela began mobilizing its military. Videos surfaced online showing Venezuelan troops carrying out rapid response drills, tanks rolling through city streets, and fighter jets conducting flyovers. Maduro declared that Venezuela was prepared to defend its sovereignty against any foreign invasion. Here's the problem, though, while Maduro talks tough, the power imbalance is massive. On one side, you've got the US Navy, destroyers, cruisers, submarines, surveillance aircraft, and thousands of troops. On the other, Venezuela's military, which has struggled for years under sanctions, corruption, and a collapsing economy. Still, Maduro's message wasn't really aimed at Washington. It was aimed at his own people, a show of strength meant to rally support at home, to convince Venezuelans that the nation is under siege and only he can protect them. But whether that strategy will hold up against real military pressure, that's another question. And to answer it, we need to take a closer look at Venezuela's actual military capabilities, and whether they stand a chance against U.S. firepower. So how does Nicolas Maduro react when the U.S. puts warships at his doorstep and slaps a $50 million bounty on his head? He doubles down. Maduro's government immediately went into damage control mode. Caracas blasted Washington's actions as nothing more than a cover for regime change, calling the U.S. naval deployment an illegal act of aggression. Venezuelan state media painted the entire operation as a distraction, claiming Trump was simply trying to score political points back home. Maduro himself pushed back hard, insisting that Venezuela had nothing to do with cartels, gangs, or so-called narco-terrorism. Instead, he accused the U.S. of fabricating charges to steal Venezuela's resources, especially its vast oil reserves. But it didn't stop at words. Almost immediately, Venezuela began mobilizing its military. Videos surfaced online showing Venezuelan troops carrying out rapid response drills, tanks rolling through city streets, and fighter jets conducting flyovers. Maduro declared that Venezuela was prepared to defend its sovereignty against any foreign invasion. Here's the problem, though. While Maduro talks tough, the power imbalance is massive. On one side, you've got the U.S. Navy, destroyers, cruisers, submarines, surveillance aircraft, and thousands of troops. On the other, Venezuela's military, which has struggled for years under sanctions, corruption, and a collapsing economy. Still, Maduro's message wasn't really aimed at Washington. It was aimed at his own people, a show of strength meant to rally support at home, to convince Venezuelans that the nation is under siege and only he can protect them. But whether that strategy will hold up against real military pressure, that's another question. And to answer it, we need to take a closer look at Venezuela's actual military capabilities, and whether they stand a chance against U.S. firepower. On paper, Venezuela has one of the largest militaries in South America. But when you compare it to the U.S. Navy, the difference is night and day. Let's break it down. Venezuela's armed forces claim around 120,000 active personnel, plus militias and reserves that Maduro says could boost the number to nearly 2 million in a national emergency. That sounds impressive, but numbers don't tell the whole story. Years of sanctions, corruption, and economic collapse have left the military with outdated equipment and limited training resources. Take the Venezuelan Air Force. Its most advanced fighters are Russian-made Su-30 flankers. About 24 of them are technically in service. They're powerful jets, but many are grounded due to lack of spare parts and maintenance. Meanwhile, the U.S. has carrier-capable F/A-18 Super Hornets, F-35 stealth fighters, and long-range bombers that could strike from thousands of miles away. The Navy? Venezuela operates a handful of frigates, patrol boats, and diesel-powered submarines, but none of them can realistically match U.S. destroyers, cruisers, or nuclear-powered attack subs like the USS Newport News now sitting in the region. On land, Venezuela has tanks, armored vehicles, and surface-to-air missiles. But against U.S. precision strikes, satellite-guided weapons, and electronic warfare systems, those defenses could be neutralized in hours. So, here's the reality: Venezuela could put up a fight, especially using guerrilla tactics, militias, and asymmetrical warfare. But in a conventional military showdown, it wouldn't stand a chance against U.S. forces. And that's exactly why the standoff is so dangerous. Maduro knows he can't win head-on, which means, if things escalate, he may turn to unconventional strategies that drag the entire region into chaos. So, what would a full-scale U.S. intervention actually look like? Let's map out the scenarios. So what would it look like if the U.S. went all in on Venezuela? It would begin with precision air and naval strikes, knocking out radar, missile sites, and air bases in hours. Then, a naval blockade would choke off Venezuela's oil exports and stop weapons from coming in. Next, special operations forces would move in, not for a full invasion, but targeted raids to capture cartel leaders and Maduro's key allies. But here's the risk: Venezuela isn't alone. If Maduro feels cornered, he could call in Russia, China, or Iran for support. That wouldn't mean full armies, but cyber attacks, weapons shipments, or intelligence could drag this into a global standoff. And let's not forget the human cost. Millions of refugees could pour into Colombia and Brazil, sparking a regional crisis. So yes, the U.S. could crush Venezuela's military. But the bigger question is, should it? Because one strike could ignite chaos far beyond Caracas. Backhand index pointing right, what do you think? Should the US intervene or stay out? Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more breakdowns of global flashpoints.